Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 219. Mount Jiao, don't go away. Mo Ran didn't answer, or perhaps he couldn't answer. He walked forward and hugged Chu Wanning. What's wrong with you? In his arms were slightly cold clothes and a warm body. Why are you crying? He didn't know. Which was dream? Which was reality? He wasn't sure. But in the Red Lotus Pavilion, the Chu Wanning that he found was not that of a lying cold body. His Shizun was alive, worrying whether the joints of the night wanderer that he had just made were not flexible enough. He was thinking about whether to apply tung oil or varnish. This seemed to be enough. For a moment, he indulged in this and didn't want to wake up. By the time he and Chu Wanning finished building the golem, it was already late. Thus, he pulled Chu Wanning back to the bedroom. Just like in their previous lives, he made love with him. The Chu Wanning in his dream was not so docile and was not willing to let himself go even when in the throes of passion. He would refuse to moan out his pleasure and would often bite his lower lip instead. His eyes would tear up, but he refused to make a sound. He would only pant heavily, and only when he couldn't really control it anymore. They didn't take the candle light out. The warm light shone on the face of the person beneath him. Mo Ran stared at his day's appearance. He stared at Chu Wanning's facial features, brows, and eyes. He stared at Chu Wanning's phoenix eyes, which were filled with the shadow of the candle light. The shadow of the candle light swayed, like petals falling from a deep pool. When Mo Ran thrusted, the petals swayed and floated in the pool. Ripples spread out. In the end, moist water fell from Chu Wanning's eyes, which was kissed by Mo Ran. He knew very well what kind of person Chu Wanning was. If he didn't use an aphrodisiac, it would be difficult to get him to orgasm. His self-control was so good that it was regrettable. But so, what? He still couldn't control his tears, nor his rapid breathing. It didn't matter even if he didn't moan. Seeing him being fucked by him to the point of tears, to the point where his face was flushed red and his eyes lost focus, to the point where his sturdy chest was heaving, and to the point where he was gasping for breath, was also very good. It was an enchanting night. They fell asleep on each other's arms, but not until the early hours of the morning. Mo Ran hugged the person in his arms tightly. Both of them were drenched in sweat. Their warm bodies were pressed against each other, and even their hair was stuck to the side of their cheeks. He kissed Chu Wanning's earlobes and neck lovingly and tenderly, hugging him as tight as possible in his arms. All is good. Shizun, now that you're by my side, all is good. He fell asleep. When he opened his eyes again, he was shocked to find that Chu Wanning was no longer by his side. Shizun. He sat up abruptly. Then he saw Chu Wanning standing by the half-open window. It was already dawn and a light rain was drizzling through the window. Mo Ran let out a sigh of relief. He reached out a hand to him and entreated him, Shizun, come here. But Chu Wanning didn't move. He was dressed very neatly, his clothes as white as snow. He calmly looked at the man on the bed. Mo Ran stared at him. Suddenly, a strong feeling of unease rose in his heart. Chu Wanning said to him, Mo Ran, it's time for me to leave. Leave? He was stunned. The bed was still warm, there were even strands of hair on the pillow. There was also a faint smell of lust. Chu Wanning was standing in front of him, but the distance between them felt so huge, as if a lake or a sea was separating them. Mo Ran anxiously asked, where are you going? This is the Red Lotus Pavilion, your home. We're already at home, so where are you going? Chu Wanning shook his head. He turned his face to the side and looked at the gradually paling sky outside the window. He said, there's no more time, it's going to be dawn soon. Wanning. In just a blink of an eye, he disappeared, leaving nothing behind. He jumped out of the bed and hurriedly put on his clothes. He didn't even bother to put on his shoes and socks as he staggered out the door. It seemed that the night before, the wind blew and thousands of snowflakes drifted down. The lush branches of the hatang blossoms from before was now all broken. Scattered flowers covered the steps, the chairs, and the stone table where the unfinished night wanderer was left. The metal glove and the file were tossed aside, as if Chu Wanning had just left for a while, as if Chu Wanning would come back at any moment. Wanning! Wanning! He ran around the Red Lotus Pavilion like a madman as he searched, but he seemed to have always avoided the Lotus Pond. Subconsciously, he didn't dare to go to the Lotus Pond. He didn't dare to go. But in the end, he still walked over there in a daze. Barefooted, he stepped on the cold bluestone pavement. He stopped quite a distance away from the Lotus Pond. Looking up from his pale toes, the last thing that could be seen was a face that was completely devoid of color. He opened his eyes wide in a daze. He looked at the man lying in the Lotus Pond in the distance. He saw him almost every day in the last 2 years before his death in his previous life. Lying on the Lotus Pond, his body hadn't decayed, his clothes were immaculate. There was no difference from when he was alive. What was the difference? He walked over step by step. Closer. Even closer. As long as he walked forward, he would be able to reach the edge of the pond. He would be able to see every eyelash, the slightly furrowed eyebrows and the phoenix eyes that seemed to never relax even after death. However, he knelt down in fear. His knees hit the stone floor. He knelt and curled up, trembling for a while. He suddenly thought of the elixir of rebirth that Lu Gong gave him, the medicine that could bring the dead back to life. He was wild with joy. His fingers trembled and curled up as he rummaged through the kinkin bag. He took out the things inside one by one. Elixir of rebirth. Elixir of rebirth. I want the elixir of rebirth that can bring the dead back to life. Where is the elixir of rebirth? Where is the elixir of rebirth? He took out everything. He turned the entire kinkin bag upside down. He didn't even let go of the gaps between the needles and threads. He checked every inch of it. But there was nothing. The elixir of rebirth was gone. The elixir of rebirth wasn't inside. Or maybe when he came across into Lu Gong and obtained the elixir of rebirth, that was only a dream. No, this was all a dream. It was one dream after another. He broke down. His mind was in chaos. He raised his hands in despair and rubbed his cheeks and eyelids. He muttered, "No, there is. I clearly put it inside. Elixir of rebirth, there is an elixir of rebirth, there is. He searched crazily again. Just like that, he knelt in front of Chu Wanning's corpse and searched hysterically. His eyes flashed with a terrifying light, but his voice became more and more choked. He became more and more desperate. In the end, he leaned over and cried loudly. I put it inside, I put it inside. He swept away the things in front of him with his palm. Countless porcelain vases fell to the ground and some even broke. He crawled forward in the midst of the broken pieces. The shards pierced into his flesh and knees, but he didn't care. He crawled towards the person lying in the lotus pond. In the end, he carried him out of the pond and held this ice-cold body tightly in his arms. This was something he always wanted to do in his previous life, but he never did. He hugged Chu Wanning's corpse. The drizzle was still lingering on the ground. The sky was brightening, but it had nothing to do with them. He hugged Chu Wanning's body and cried. He held his cheeks and kissed the bridge of his nose, his eyelids, his lips. Shizun. I beg you, listen to me. I beg you. In that instant, his figure overlapped with that of the orphan who once held his mother's rotting body in the mass grave. He broke down and wailed, begging a passerby to bury him with his mother. That year, he was only 5 years old. A 5-year-old child swore that never again would he see his loved one's flesh and bones rot and scattered into the mud in front of him. In the blink of an eye, so many years had passed. The 32-year-old emperor, Taxian Jun hugged his Shizun's corpse. Sometimes he would laugh hysterically and sometimes he would cry bitterly. It was a body that was no different from when it was alive. He did it. He could make the dead look like a living person. Under the skin of this corpse, there seemed to be a faint color of blood. He looked so peaceful as if he was merely asleep. This time, he did not plead with anyone to bury him and Chu Wanning together deep underground. However, Taxian Jun had already buried himself alive. On the day after Chu Wanning's death, he drank a jar of pear blossom white. After that, he spent every single day in a tomb of the living dead called the Red Lotus Pavilion, living a life of drunkenness. From that day on, he had buried himself. Shizun, please. Mo ran. I beg you. He vaguely heard someone calling him. It was a familiar voice. His surroundings were dark again. He was like a drowning person holding onto a piece of driftwood. Someone reached out to him. He choked and held on tightly to that person. Don't go. I won't do anything bad anymore. I won't make you angry anymore. He held on to that person's fingers and intertwined their fingers together. He smelled a faint fragrance of flowers, the fragrance of Haetang. I have an elixir of rebirth that can bring the dead back to life, but I don't know why. I can't find it. I can't find it. But can you not go? I beg you. He ignored everything and held on to that warm body. He hugged that body. Please, I'd rather the person who died was me. Mo ran. Wake up. But he couldn't wake up. The pain was deeper than the sea. He was drowning, but he couldn't wake up. His throat choked. He hugged the person who was calling him. His eyelashes were wet. I'd rather the person who died was me, Shizun. You dog. What are you doing? Hey. Suddenly, a person rushed over and grabbed him. Then, the surroundings were in chaos. Someone poured cold water between his lips. Mo Ran suddenly felt cold all over again. The water was as cold as thousand-year-old mysterious ice. It almost froze his lungs. He suddenly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Jiangxi's gloomy face. He was holding a green jade bottle in his hand. Obviously, what was poured into his mouth was from the bottle. When he opened his mouth, he found that his throat was hoarse. He couldn't say anything for a while. Then, he looked around and found that he was back again in the ancestral hall of the Rufeng sect, the heavenly palace. His clothes were soaked in cold sweat. The people around him were looking at him strangely, especially Xue Meng. His face was green and white. He didn't look good. He was lying on Chu Wanning's knees and hugging Chu Wanning's waist tightly. Chu Wanning's clothes, which were originally neat and proper, were messed up by him while he was trapped in the nightmare. The edges of his outer robe had slipped to his shoulders. Mo ran. He didn't say anything suspicious, did he? Chu Wanning's expression didn't look right, but he was still calm as he asked, why did you run so fast? Shizun, You were trapped in a nightmare. Jiangxi put away the jade bottle and stood up again. He lowered her eyes and said, rest for a while. I fed you the dream-breaking frost water. You'll feel very cold, but you'll be fine after a cup of tea. Mo Ran still hadn't recovered from the layers of terrifying dreams. His eyes were still a little confused. After a long time, he muttered, trapped in a nightmare? But I've been very careful. I didn't feel any traces of a spell. Jiangxi's claws and teeth revealed their sharpness. Spell? What's that stupid thing? Everyone present. Do you think the most ruthless thing in the world is a spell? The leader of the medicine sect narrowed his eyes and shook his sleeves. You're ridiculously wrong. The most powerful thing in the world is medicine. In this heavenly palace, there was a type of incense that was lit in advance. It's called the 19 Hells incense. This incense is colorless and scentless, but it can make people hallucinate and experience the greatest fear of their life. Jiang Shi paused and then looked at Mo Ran. The greater the fear, the deeper one falls. I saved a few people who were trapped by 19 hell's incense by giving them 4 to 5 drops of the dream-breaking frost water and they woke up. But do you know how much you drank? How much? Jiang Shi seemed a little unhappy as he said, more than half a bottle. It's enough to save more than 100 people before your consciousness was called back. I'm a little curious. Grandmaster Mo, you're so young. Why do you have such deep fear? What are you afraid of? End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 220. Mount Jiao walking side by side. Mo Ran fell silent. If it wasn't for this nightmare, he wouldn't have known that there were such terrifying fears hidden in the depths of his heart. He was afraid of Chu Wanning's death, scared of Shimei questioning of his feelings and terrified that this current life of his was actually just a dream. He lowered his head. He didn't know if it was the effect of the dream-breaking frost water or some other reasons, but he felt very cold. So cold that he couldn't help shivering. Chu Wanning stood up from the ground. There were too many eyes here. He couldn't act too intimately with Mo Ran. Not to mention that Mo Ran kept hugging him and calling his name while he was in the nightmare. If he didn't do his best to restrain him, he would have been pressed to the ground by Mo Ran in front of everyone. Although this didn't happen in the end, Mo Ran's emotions were so intense that he didn't know how many people around them had already noticed that something was amiss. Chu Wanning slowly stood up. He had been sitting for a long time that his legs had gone sore and numb. Shuemeng subconsciously raised his hand, but for some reason, he didn't go forward to help him. Shimei reached out and said softly, "Shizun, take it easy." Chu Wanning lowered his eyelashes. He didn't say much, nor did he explain. He just took off his already messy outer robe. His white robe fluttered and fell on Mo Ran's shoulder. "Wear it. You can return it to me when the cold effect of the medicine disappeared." Mo Ran didn't dare to look at him too much. He only answered softly, "Yes, Shizun." The others were carefully inspecting the scene in the hall, some were checking if there were any hidden weapons or traps, then they all dispersed. Xue Zhenyang asked Mo Ran a few questions. When he saw that his nephew was fine, he patted his shoulder and strode towards the other sect leaders. Shuemeng, however, didn't leave. When the others were far enough, he suddenly bent down and looked left and right. He lowered his voice and said angrily, "What did you dream of just now?" Mo Ran. Shuemeng gritted his teeth, "I'm asking you a question." "It's just a dream." "Then what was it about?" Shuemeng's eyes were a little chaotic. He was very anxious as he insisted, "Dreams are manifestation of what's on your mind. So, what are you thinking about? Are you? I dreamed that I killed someone." Mo Ran trembled slightly because of the bone-chilling cold. His lips were also pale. "I dreamt that I killed Shizun." "You? That's all?" Shuemeng's lips quivered as if he wanted to ask something more. However, hearing Mo Ran just now, it didn't seem as if he was lying when he said that in his nightmare, he killed Shizun. He didn't know why would Mo Ran felt such fear, especially now that he respected Shizun much more than before. However, the expression on his face when he was tightly holding on to Shizun, was that the expression a disciple should have towards his Shizun? There seemed to be something more. Shuemeng didn't dare to continue this line of thinking. It was like one more step and he would fall into a bottomless abyss. The effect of the medicine gradually disappeared. Mo Ran slowly stood up from the ground. Shuemeng hesitated for a while, but still supported him. Mo Ran said, "Thank you." Then he looked at the cultivators walking in front of him. "Did anyone else get affected by the incense?" "No, only you. You ran too fast and was so far ahead of everyone else." Shuemeng still had a lot on his mind, but his emotions weren't as intense as before. The moment we entered the hall, Jiangxi sensed that the 18 ghosts incense was lit here. It's not 18 ghosts, it's the 19 hells incense. Anyway, it's that thing. The name isn't important, Xuemeng said. He dispelled it. Only after then did we came in again, so it's fine. He paused as he suddenly thought of something and continued, however, this is also a coincidence. If something worse had happened just now, it would have been troublesome. What do you mean? You were too fast, so you didn't see it? On our way to the heavenly palace, several poisonous snakes suddenly jumped out of the rattan basket Nangonglu was carrying. Many people couldn't dodge it in time and were bitten. Those people could only stay where they were as the snake's venom is very poisonous. Jiangxi wanted us to go first and he would stay there to help treat those who were poisoned and then he would follow after us. If that has happened, then I'm afraid that everyone who reached the heavenly palace would have been under the influence of the incense. Xuemeng said, he only had one bottle of dream-breaking frost water. He wouldn't have been able to save so many people. Moran vaguely felt that something was wrong and asked, then why didn't he stay there to help those who were poisoned? He has a young disciple who said that he could do it, so Jiangxi left his disciple there and came up with us first. Moran's frown deepened. His gaze followed the Gaiyuye group, circling the crowd, but he couldn't find the person he was looking for. If Jiangxi's disciple didn't know how to deal with the snake's venom, then there were only two people left, Jiangxi and Hua Binan. Where's Hua Binan? Xuemeng was stunned. Are you suspecting the Hanlin divine hands? I'm just asking. There's nothing to suspect. Hua Binan was bitten himself, and he's meditating below. But there's a lot of poison in his body, so it would take him a while to be fine. He said he'll come up and meet us later. Moran's expression became even more gloomy. Hanlin divine hands was injured and couldn't move, so the only one left who could heal him was Jiangxi. Fortunately, Jiangxi had a disciple who happened to know how to deal with the snake's venom. Without this person, Jiangxi would probably still be down there trying to extract the poison from the injured cultivators. When he came up again, what kind of scene would this ancestral temple heavenly palace be like? Would a bottle of dream-breaking frost water be enough to salvage the situation? Xuemeng. Keep an eye on Hua Binan. As soon as he said this, he suddenly felt the ground shake. Then, the distant cry of a dragon pierced through the sky, coming from outside the palace. Some people were like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. What's going on? What was that noise just now? A courageous cultivator said, I'll go take a look. He quickly rushed to the entrance of the palace and looked down, then looked up at the sky. Then, he turned back and said, it's nothing. It's probably just some noise coming from this mountain. After all, it's the manifestation of a Jiao dragon evil spirit. After he finished speaking, he prepared to head back. However, at that moment, his ankle was suddenly grabbed by something. The cultivator lowered his head and saw a deathly pale hand. For a moment, he didn't react as he was still in a daze. Xue Zhenjiang's eyes were sharp and he shouted from a distance, look out. But it was too late. A corpse leaped into the air. The corpse was wrapped in the Rufeng sect's blue martial robe and its eyes were blindfolded with a silk ribbon. Its sword firmly and accurately pierced the cultivator's chest. The cultivator's eyes widened in confusion. He subconsciously raised his hand to touch the sword that pierced through his chest. Then, he spat out a large mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with a thump, never to move again. After a few moments of deathly silence, the ground started to shake again. Everyone looked at the entrance of the hall and saw thick dragon tendons rising from the ground, piercing through the clouds. Each of the dragon tendons was holding the body of a first-generation disciple of the Rufeng sect. From a distance, it looked like a dense swarm of bees, ready to rush into the hall at any time and crush everyone into meat paste. Villa Master Ma screamed and covered his eyes. Heavens, Heavens, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Xue Zhenyang was so angry that he spat out blood. He slapped the back of the merchant's head to shut him up. Then, he shouted at the crowd, quickly close the palace's entrance. Hurry up and block the entrance of the palace. Don't let them rush in. As he spoke, he took the lead and faced the fierce corpse that was swaying and walking over with a sword dripping with blood. He waved his folding fan and knocked it out of the hall. He kicked it down the long stairs and then grabbed the spirit stone door on the side, roaring as he tried to push it up. But for some reason, the door that was so easy to push from the outside was as heavy as a boulder when pushed from the inside. Xue Zhenjiang's blue veins bulged, but his strength was like a clay ox entering the sea. Seeing the group of fierce corpses being lifted closer and closer by the dragon tendons, Xue Zhenyang cursed, "What's going on? Didn't Nangong Zhongying just seal them? These bullshit Jiao dragons are not obedient at all. They are going against their master's order." Mo Ran and Xue Meng immediately rushed to Xue Zhenjiang's side to help. Nangong Si said, "It's useless. These 2 spirit stones were transported by my great-grandfather's 4,000 porters. It's impossible for you to move them." Huang Xiaoyu was so angry that smoke was coming out of his mouth. He cursed at the side, "Your great-grandfather is really capable." But Nangong Si ignored him. Nangong Si said to the group of people who were trying to block the fierce corpses at the entrance, "We have to go to the end of the hall to pull the trigger to close the door from the inside. Please block them for a while, I'll go and pull that trigger." Xue Zhenjiang's iron fan danced in the air, creating a black shadow. He swung his fan and slapped away 3 or 4 fierce corpses that were already in front of him. Black blood immediately splattered all over the fan, landing on the characters that said Xue Zhenyang is very beautiful. However, these fierce corpses were really brave. Xue Zhenyang turned his head and said, "Hurry up. There are more and more of them coming up. Fuck. What the hell is going on?" Mo Ran summoned Jiangui. He knew that the door was the last line of defense, so he simply rushed out and fought with the fierce corpses on the stairs. However, the stairs were narrow and he couldn't use his full strength. He also had to be careful not to fall from the sky-high stairs, so it was very tiring to fight. He swept a row of fierce corpses that were trying to climb up with his vine whip, but there were more and more corpses around him that were being lifted up by the pungent dragon tendons. In the end, he was almost surrounded by enemies and couldn't get out of the sea of fierce corpses. However, Mo Ran didn't plan to get away immediately. These fierce corpses were rushing up because they smelled the scent of humans. He was the closest target standing here, so almost all the fierce corpses were rushing in his direction. Villa Master Ma shivered behind Jiangxi. At this time, he sighed with emotion, "Oh, Grandmaster Mo is really righteous. How bold, how bold." Jiangxi was angry. He turned his head and said, "Can't you do something else besides mercantile? I only know things that require time to study, such as arrays, weapon assembly and the likes. I'm really not good at close combat." Villa Master Ma looked at Jiangxi's cold eyes and choked. After hesitating for a while, he said tentatively, "How about I cheer for you?" Jiangxi was speechless. However, what this fellow said was not wrong. Every sect had their own strengths and weaknesses. In this kind of bloody battle, only a few people would be able to save their lives if they rushed up. The others would just be sending themselves to their deaths. Even Jiangxi could not get close. The medicinal powder was useless on corpses. Xue Meng stood at the entrance of the hall with Long Cheng in his hand. He stared at the black figure floating under the crane's banner. He saw a dragon tendon rise from the ground carrying a high-level disciple of the Rufeng sect towards Mo Ran. Xue Meng couldn't stand it anymore. He drew his sword and cut off the arm of that fierce corpse. Then, he stood back to back with Mo Ran and cut off the twisting dragon tendon. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. Xue Zhenyang shouted, "Meng Air! Come back. It's all right. I'll be with him. It was obvious who he was referring to. Moran turned his head and said to Shuemeng, quickly, go back. I will take care of this place. You'll be the second line of defense. If I can't hold on, you. Shut up. Shuemeng's Longcheng buzzed. He said angrily, are you the number one on Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference, or am I? Are you the first young master of Shisheng Peak or am I? Are you stronger or am I stronger? Moran's chest heated up. He stopped talking and focused on fighting back to back with Shuemeng. They faced the rampaging fierce corpses from all directions. Just then, the stone doors on both sides suddenly shook and slowly closed towards the middle. Xue Zhenyang was overjoyed and said, good, 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 it's moving. The doors are closing. You two, come back. Come this way. Moran and Shuemeng worked together. Jianghui's scarlet hue and Longchen's red glare danced left and right. There were clanking sounds as countless corpses fell from the sky and dragon tendons were broken. They slowly moved toward the doors, which were also closing bit by bit. Shuemeng said, you go in first. Moran said, let's go in together. Go. What are you waiting for? Xue Zhenyang said anxiously, quick. Come back. Moran grabbed Shuemeng's collar. Shuemeng said angrily, let go. Don't play hero with me, you. Who's playing hero with you? Let's go. As Moran said this, he grabbed Shuemeng with one hand and stepped on the stone steps with one foot. He swung his hand and pushed back a group of fierce corpses that were about to charge at them. Then, he and Shuemeng rushed toward the doors. The doors were only half closed, so they were not in a hurry. Moran threw Shuemeng to Xue Zhenyang and leaned against the doors. He held Jianghui and stood against the wind. His eyes were burning as he slowly retreated. All of a sudden, the two boulders that were in the process of closing together stopped. Shuemeng said in surprise, why did it stop moving? He turned around and saw that Nangongxi's face was pale. He walked out from behind the stone pillars of the heavenly palace that were so thick that it would take 10 grown men to wrap their arms around them. He said in a gloomy tone, the central axis of the sphincter was destroyed. When it was half closed, the chain broke and can't be reconnected. After Nangongxi finished speaking, he raised his hand. In his scarred palm, there was half of a bronze lock that was slightly shaking. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 221. Mount Jiao handing over. Shuemeng almost choked on a mouthful of blood, but Moran didn't have the time to be angry. When he heard these words, he turned around and faced the horde of fierce corpses, blocking the first line of defense. Chu Wanning had been helping Nangongxi adjust the mechanism that was obviously tampered with. At this time, he saw Moran struggling in the front, so he immediately flew to the door and shouted, Moran, come back. Shizun. Chu Wanning cast the golden barrier. The barrier shone brightly, pushing the horde of fierce corpses back a few feet. Then, he placed 3 barriers on the stairs, in front of the hall, and in between the stone door. He then pulled Moran back. Stop fighting. Moran anxiously said, Shizun's barrier won't last long inside Mount Xiao. Shizun, why do you have to do this? Chu Wanning's eyes were like blue frost and purple lightning. He gritted his teeth and pushed Moran back into the hall. You're injured. Do you want to die? Go inside and meditate. Shi Mingjing. Shizun, I'm here. Chu Wanning fiercely pointed at Moran, heal him. Shi Mei nodded, yes, Shizun. Moran pressed down on Shi Mei's outstretched hand and said to Chu Wanning, these are all superficial wounds. Shizun, your barrier can only last for a stick of incense's worth of time. It will also consume a lot of your spiritual power. You. Chu Wanning didn't turn his head and stood in the light, then I'll hold on for a stick of incense's worth of time. Moran still wanted to say something, but Shi Mei pulled him back. Shi Mei's slightly cold hand touched his skin, rolled up his sleeves and began to cast a spell to heal his wounds. Moran looked into his eyes as Shi Mei silently shook his head at him, then lowered his eyes and focused on his own spell. Chu Wanning said, "Shui Meng." "Yes, Shizun. If I can't hold on anymore, you take over, but don't force yourself. Once you feel that your strength is no longer enough, let sect leader take over." Shui Zhenyang hurriedly said, "That's right, it's better to take turns." Chu Wanning continued to channel his spiritual energy into the barrier and said, "There's another thing I'll have to trouble the sect leader with." "Speak." Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and said, "Ask that group of useless people hiding in the back. Other than those from the Taxia Palace and Gaiyuye who aren't good at close combat, get those who can fight to come over here." "What if they don't come over?" Chu Wanning said, "Then tell them we'll break through the gates and wait for them below. See if they can make it." Shui Zhenyang hurriedly went over. Nangong Si was staring at the broken lock in his hand with a gloomy face, not knowing what to do. He also didn't know why the Grand Sect leader's order was suddenly defied. Logically speaking, as long as it was Nangong Zhengying who has ordered the Jiao Dragon Spirit, no one should be able to supersede it. Why did it suddenly become like this? Shui Zhenyang asked those who have fighting capability to go to the front. Ye Wangzi said, "I'll do it." Nangong Si immediately came back to his senses. He pulled her back and said, "You're a girl, how can you?" Ye Wangzi stared at Zhang Donghall's group of subservient disciples and said coldly, "Even if there are only 2 people in the Rufeng sect, we will not cower." The several middle-aged female cultivators who had previously ridiculed Ye Wangzi for wanting to stand up for him even though she was a girl didn't say anything. They all looked elsewhere, not looking at Ye Wangzi's face. Just like that, Shui Zhenyang managed to gather some people. Suddenly, he was stunned. "Hanks, you? Why are you also?" No, you're not good at this kind of thing. You go back." Mei Hanxiu also looked cold and collected today. He said, "Uncle, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I won't play around." Shui Zhenyang looked at the palace master of the Taxia Palace. Seeing that he had no objection to this, he had no choice but to let Mei Hanxiu join this group of people. Zhang Shi frowned. "Are we going to keep resisting like this? It's better to leave some people who are suitable for close quarters combat and send them to the rear hall to see what's going on." Shui Zhenyang said, "Let's deal with it for a while first and see if we can fix the lock mechanism. The best plan is to go together. If we really can't fix it, then we can only divide into 2 groups. One group will resist the horde trying to come inside, the other group will go to the rear hall to see what's going on." Zhang Shi said. "All right, sounds good. But who knows how to fix the lock mechanism?" At this time, Villa Master Ma Yun, who had just been scolded by Zhang Shi like a coward, raised a trembling hand. He poked his head out and said weakly, If what's required is mechanical skill, I think I can try." Zhang Shi was both angry and amused. "Then get going." Ma Yun dragged Nangong Si and staggered away. Shui Zhenyang also led the troops to action. Zhang Shi turned around and looked around at the hall that was divided into Purgatory and 9 heavens. He fell into deep thought. His gaze swept across the Zhenlong chess pieces who were still laughing and chatting in one place, and to those being tortured on the other side. Finally, his gaze fell on Nangong Lu, who had been squatting beside a basket of oranges. He felt very strange. Why didn't Nangong Lu or the other chess pieces in the hall go berserk like the corpses outside and kill people? If Su Xuanglin controlled the Zhenlong chess pieces in the hall to attack them at this moment, they were bound to be caught in a dilemma. Why didn't he do it? It's either he didn't want to do it or, he couldn't do it. Zhang Shi was surprised, but Mo Ran was not surprised at all. He could clearly feel that the Zhenlong chess pieces in the hall all retained the temperament, obsession, and even some memories when they were still alive. They were completely different from the fierce corpses being controlled by the shared heart array outside. To make an inappropriate analogy, the fierce corpses outside were puppets, while these chess pieces inside were all living dead with independent temperaments. There was only one reason why Su Xuanglin didn't control these living dead: his spiritual energy had already reached the limit. "Grandmaster Chu, give me a hand." Suddenly, a weak call came from the bottom of the stone steps. Chu Wanning looked and saw Hua Binan leading a dozen cultivators to break out of the encirclement on the stone steps with great difficulty. They were previously bitten by the poisonous snake, so they rested on the spot. They didn't expect to encounter the second horde of fierce corpses. Half of the 20 cultivators were killed in an instant. At this moment, those who struggled to fight until they got here were all seriously injured. Chu Wanning immediately raised his hand and cast another layer of barrier around them to protect them. Then, he threw out Tianwen to repel the fierce corpses that were attacking around them. "Come here." Chu Wanning stretched out his hand to Hua Binan. Mo Ran suddenly became alert. He didn't care that Shi Mei was only half done in applying the medicine to him. He immediately stood up to stop him. "Shizun, be careful." However, Hua Binan didn't act suspiciously. He held out a trembling hand towards Chu Wanning's outstretched hand. Chu Wanning pulled him into the stronger protective barrier behind him. Then Chu Wanning turned around and called out, "Come and help." The survivors were pulled back one by one and carried to the main hall. They were all groaning and gasping for breath. Their faces were covered in blood and their expressions showed they were feeling extreme pain. Zhang Shi led the group of disciples forward. He bent down in front of Hua Binan and revealed a rare expression of anxiety. "Why are you so badly injured?" "I'm still fine." "Sect leader, you should go and see to the others first." Hua Binan leaned against a pillar. His bamboo hat and veil had been cut open, and his robes were stained with blood. Zhang Shi wanted to take his pulse, but he raised a hand to stop him. "I'm fine. It's just a small injury." The sect leader's disciple, on the other hand, is too badly injured. "Sect leader, you should go and treat him quickly. Don't worry about me." This group of people were indeed seriously injured. Some of them even had their entire leg broken. Compared to them, Hua Binan, who could still speak, was indeed seemed better off. Zhang Shi cursed under his breath. He glanced at Hua Binan again, then turned back to treat the others. Hua Binan trembled as he fumbled for a bottle of blood medicine powder from his kinkan bag. Just as he was about to sprinkle it on his wounds, a hand suddenly grabbed the porcelain bottle in his hand. Mo Ran said, "I'll help you." "No need." Mo Ran looked at him with deep eyes. "It's just applying the powder. It's no trouble at all." Hua Binan snatched the porcelain bottle and said in a low voice, "I'm not used to others touching me. Besides, you're not a healing cultivator at all. You might end up making things worse. Then let me be the one to help you." "Shi Mei." Mo Ran turned his head and saw that Shi Mei had already put down his medicine bag. Hua Binan saw the medicine bag and curled his lips. He didn't say anything and didn't resist. Shi Mei spread out the cloth bag filled with silver needles and said in a low voice, "Senior Han Lin, please forgive this junior for his limited knowledge." Hua Binan was speechless. His injuries were serious. It was useless to use spells to stop the bleeding. Acupuncture needles would have to be used first. A cold light suddenly flashed. Shi Mei's eyes flashed with the light of the silver needles. In the blink of an eye, he had inserted more than 10 needles. Senior's veil and bamboo hat. A trace of gloominess flashed through Han Lin Divine Hand's eyes, but he also knew that there were a few acupuncture points that had to be pierced on the face. With a ruthless expression, he said, "I'll take them off myself." The blood-stained veil fell, revealing the Han Lin Divine Hand's face, which was never shown to others before. It was an extremely strange face. The upper half of his face could be considered delicate and pretty, but from the bridge of his nose down to the rest of his face was burned, with twisted skin filled with dotted scars. Hua Binan raised his head. There was a faint trace of hatred and ridicule in his eyes. What's wrong? Grandmaster Mo, why aren't you leaving yet? Do you think it's nice to stay here? I'm sorry. Hua Binan sneered behind him. I already told you that there's no need for you to be here, but you didn't listen. Now you're saying you're sorry, but who knows what you were really thinking. You probably thought that this Hanlin Divine Hands is really ugly, eh? Mo Ran shook his head and left without saying anything more. Villa Master Ma was still fiddling with the broken iron lock. In front of the heavenly palace, Chu Wanning's spiritual power was almost depleted. He turned to Xuemeng and said, Xuemeng, take over. Xuemeng immediately understood and raised his sword. The exchange between the two of them was completed very smoothly. Not a single fierce corpse was able to squeeze in during the exchange. As soon as Chu Wanning removed the barrier, he couldn't help but take a step back. Mo Ran saw his pale face and felt very distressed. However, he couldn't do anything in front of everyone. He couldn't even hold Chu Wanning's hand. He could only suppress himself and ask, Wan. Shizun, are you alright? I'm fine. Chu Wanning lightly coughed. I just used a bit more spiritual energy than normal. However, Mo Ran knew that Chu Wanning's spirit core was originally very weak. Using more spiritual power might not be a big deal for others, but for Chu Wanning. Mo Ran closed his eyes. In his past life, this Shizun and disciple were at odds with each other. Chu Wanning had used up all of his spiritual energy in their life and death battle, where Chu Wanning's spiritual core had instantly shattered. From then on, he was no different from a normal mortal. In fact, his body was even weaker than a normal mortal's. How could he be fine? Mo Ran's heart constricted. His eyes were slightly red. He silently put the robes that Chu Wanning had put on him earlier and put it back on his shoulders. Only at this time could he gently squeeze Chu Wanning's shoulders through the clothes. He could only hiddenly express his ardent love for him through this light touch. He supported Chu Wanning to the side. He especially looked for a place with fewer people, a quiet spot, and then sat down with Chu Wanning. While no one was looking, Mo Ran quietly held Chu Wanning's hand. It was very cold. His hands felt as cold as that year when Chu Wanning was defeated by his blade. He leaned over and stepped on his chest, then reached out and pinched his chin. Mo Ran lowered his eyes. The tips of his fingers were slightly trembling. Chu Wanning originally wanted to pull his hand away. After all, there were too many eyes here. However, he felt that weak tremble. So, the hand that was about to pull away turned back and interlocked fingers with him. Let me see. Chu Wanning raised his other hand and had Mo Ran lift his face. There were wounds on his cheeks and the bridge of his nose. Does it hurt? Mo Ran shook his head. He stared at Chu Wanning's face. He looked at the person who clearly cared about him even though his very own lips were pale. He did feel pained. But it wasn't from his wounds. It was his heart. He finally learned to lie like Chu Wanning and said, "It doesn't hurt." If it doesn't hurt, then why are you trembling? He didn't make a sound. He couldn't make a sound. So, Chu Wanning misunderstood that he was still trembling because of the pain. A faint green light surrounded his fingertips. Mo Ran's pupils suddenly shrank. He grabbed Chu Wanning's hand that was about to touch his cheek. What are you doing? You're even using spiritual power. This little bit is nothing. Chu Wanning said, it's just the tiniest healing spell. It's just to stop the pain. His fingertips touched his wound. It was to stop the pain. But his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Death by 1,000 cuts was probably nothing compared to this. Mo Ran naturally knew that this was just a little bit of spiritual power. It was like a cup of water against the vast ocean. Chu Wanning was the type who would be willing to give almost all of his spiritual power to everyone, sparing only a little bit for himself. In his previous life, because Chu Wanning always gave the world too much and keep too little for himself, he resented Chu Wanning then. Yet he didn't know then that whatever Chu Wanning had given him, pitifully small they might be, was all that he had left. All right? It's fixed. It's fixed. Suddenly, a cultivator under Manor Master Ma's command hurriedly ran to the door. His cheeks were red as he shouted, "Quickly prepare to retreat. We're closing the door. We're about to close the door." At this time, the person keeping the horde of attacking fierce corpse was Mei Hangxiu. Xuemeng retreated after he was injured. His injuries weren't very serious, so he simply wrapped gauze around his wounds. He tied the knot while watching Mei Hangxiu retreat. It was strange. He clearly remembered that Mei Hangxiu's spiritual core was of water and wood attributes. He didn't know why he was able to use techniques of fire attribute type. He thought that he was going to use a water attribute attack with his Kong Hao. Mei Hangxiu's fingers stroked the strings, his face was ice cold. What he used was a fiery red barrier of flames, forcing back the fierce corpses that tried to approach. "Close the door. Young Master Mei." Mei Hangxiu let the Kong Hao hang in the air as he retreated, step by step. When he reached the door, Xuemeng suddenly discovered that something was wrong. He turned his head and said, "Can you open the door a bit wide? His Kong Hao is too wide. It won't get in." "No need." Mei Hangxiu coldly and succinctly interrupted Xuemeng's words. He suddenly put away the Kong Hao in a music box. After losing the Kong Hao's spiritual fire sound suppression, a group of fierce corpses rushed up in an instant. Xuemeng knew that he was not good at close combat. His expression suddenly changed as he pulled out his long cheng to rush out to help. Unexpectedly, before he even arrived, he saw a flash of silver light. At some unknown time, a silver sword appeared in Mei Hangxiu's hand. The sword's chi was awe-inspiring. He only saw his sword dance into a shadow. Then, he swept the ground and retreated. He suddenly threw the sword. Before the door was about to close, Mei Hangxiu raised his hand and sternly said, "Shuofeng, come back." The sword turned into a snow-white light and entered through the gap. Mei Hangxiu caught it abruptly and brought it back to his side. Then the door to the heavenly palace slammed shut. A muffled sound came from outside. It was the sound of the corpses and dragon tendons smashing into the door. However, it seemed to come from very, very far away. The Nangong clan built the palace gate in such a way that it was not easy to break through. Everyone let out a long sigh of relief. There were quite a few disciples of the upper cultivation world who had never seen the world. Their legs went soft and they knelt on the ground. There were even some who were so pathetic that they even cried out, "Mother! What is this all about?" Mei Hangxiu, who was at the back, also let out a slight sigh of relief. However, the way he did it was so discreet. If it weren't for Xuemeng staring at him from the side, he probably wouldn't have noticed that he slightly opened his lips and lightly exhaled. Suddenly, Mei Hangxiu discovered disturbing gazes from his side. He turned his head and asked, "What? Why are you looking at me?" Xuemeng's throat was somewhat dry. "Your sword." Mei Hangxiu glanced sideways at the long sword flowing with silver light. "Shuofeng." Xuemeng's face was cloudy. He was unsettled for a while before he finally opened his mouth and said, "When did you learn how to use a sword?" No, it should be, "When did you get a holy weapon?" "I've always had one." Xuemeng was stunned. "Then why didn't you use it during the Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference?" Mei Hangxiu was silent for a moment before he answered, "I didn't want to use it then." Xuemeng seemed very puzzled. He was even a little angry. "Are you looking down on us? If you had used your holy weapon, you might have placed number 1. I meant number 2. Mei Hangxue rolled his eyes. His usually cold eyes seemed to be somewhat mocking. He looked at Xuemeng, whose cheeks were slightly red from anger. After a while, he said, "Third place is very good. First." He pursed his lips and walked over. A few words casually fell into Xuemeng's ears as Mei Hangxue brushed past him. "First place is too stupid." End chapter.